Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, and happy last day of Bookmas. We have officially done 13 whole days of Bookmas, and that is wild. I have posted every single day, even when there were some moments when I didn't think I was going to be able to do so. And don't worry, even though Bookmas is technically ending, at least for me, I know there's a lot of other channels that are doing Bookmas and Vlogmas, and you can definitely catch up with their channels. I do plan on still making some festive videos and of course posting for the rest of the month, but I'm just not going to do it every single day, and take things a little bit at my own pace and kind of relax and enjoy the rest of the month of December. So I hope you don't mind. I hope you've enjoyed all the videos I have posted so far. And with today being the very last day of Bookmas, I wanted to do a little homage to all the books that basically made me into the reader I am today, the ones that started my reading journey, the ones that still carried along the way, and the books that brought me back to reading after I finished college and kind of lost my way with my whole reading journey. So with that being said, I hope you're excited for this video because I am too. I kind of was getting all teary and nostalgic when I was looking through my bookshelves and finding the books that I wanted to mention to you all. So with that being said, let us go and get started. Something about myself was when I was very little, my parents kind of did this thing where they always wanted me to read before going to bed. And so my parents kind of did this trade-off with their different work shifts. So my dad would usually work during the day and he'd be home at night. My mom would be off during the day and she'd work at night, so that there was usually someone that could go and watch me and stay at home with me because I was an only child. But when I wasn't with them, I was usually with my grandma, who would also read books with me all the time. But with my dad, one of the books that we would always read was the I Spy books. We'd usually go and do a couple of different chapters, and I'm saying chapters as there'd be the 2 different pages and then all the different items you'd have to go and find. And then sometimes, depending on how long it took for us to finish one, we'd do another one. And we'd kind of do this little competition of who could find the most items. I'm sure my dad was probably going easy on me and at least letting me find a couple. But we'd do that, and then as I got older, then we'd end up going and maybe reading a couple chapters out of a book. I know that there was some books for Mary, Kate, and Ashley, and unfortunately, I can't remember what those books were called, at least the ones that we read. And a lot of my childhood books I still have, but they're in a tote at my parents' house because I wanted to save them for the day that I'd eventually have kids of my own. So I can't go and pull those out and remember which books those are. Nuggy's eating and drinking water in the background, so sorry for the food sounds. But when I was with my grandma, some of the different books that we would go and read would be some of these. And they are books by Thornton W. Burgess. We have Old Mother West Wind, The Adventures of Grandfather Frog, The Adventures of Bobby Raccoon, The Adventures of Chatter the Red Squirrel, and then The Adventures of Danny Meadow Mouse. We would go and read these books together, and they're fairly small. I want to say, yeah, there'd be some pages throughout the books, but these books were so cute and precious. As you can tell, like, there's little forest creatures that have clothing and have their own little tasks that they're going and doing in their home in the green meadows. And I just remember loving these books so much, to the point where I had to make sure that I had my own copies. I think that there are other ones too that I'm still missing, and I do want to go and collect them and have all of them just for the nostalgia purposes, and also when eventually I do have kids of my own. But these definitely curated a huge love of books and also of cute little woodland creatures. My grandma really established a lot of these loves for me because she was a librarian. So we would also always go to the library, go and check out books, and then go and read them at home. So these are very, very fond to me. Probably some of my most prized possessions when it comes to books. And I love these stories so, so much. I don't know necessarily if I'd want to read them now, because I don't think I'd really be interested in them unless I was reading them to a kid. So I probably won't revisit these stories, at least for the next few years or so. One of the books that we did go and check out from the library was actually this book, Stand Tall, Molly Lou Mellon. And I love this book so much. There's a few different books now that are kind of added onto this series, but something I loved about this story, and even though it isn't necessarily a disability story, I do have this book as one of my recommendations for parents to go and pick up for their kiddos, because with this one, it's this little girl who's smaller than all the other kids and has a lot of differences. Her family ends up going and having her pack up all her stuff and move away, and sadly move away from her grandma. And while she's at this new school, she kind of gets picked on by this kid that is making fun of her buck teeth, or the way she sings, the way she cuts snowflakes. And she will go and write to her grandma about all of this stuff. There's little pieces about like Molly Lou Mellon didn't care because her grandma always told her this and this. And so she would go and do that stuff. And then at the end of the book, basically the bully ends up going and apologizing to her and wants to be her friend. And I'm kind of choking up right now, but I'm also on my period, so don't make fun of me. But this is really such a fond story of mine. I love the art in the book. It is so cute and precious. So this was another fond memory of mine that also established my love of reading, and is a book that every time I pick it up, it just reminds me of my own grandma. Last book that really gives me a lot of good memories of my grandma is the Macduff stories. I absolutely love this book. It does have a little bit of wear and tear on the spine. This is one that we would always go and read too, and I even remember my mom going and reading this book with me as well. As you can tell, a lot of the stories that I really cherish from my childhood are ones that have cute little animals in them. So this was another one I really loved, and one of my grandma's favorite dogs as well. Then moving on to elementary school, I was actually in the advanced readers group, and with our group, a lot of the time the teacher would have us go and separate from the other kiddos, and I think basically I was like reading at a 5th grade level when I was maybe in 1st or 2nd grade. So there was like 2 other kids that were in my group as well that we would usually get separated from everyone else. And I remember that one teacher of mine, she was so fond of my imagination and how creative I was, that she was like, I have a book that you need to go and read. And it is the last of the really great Whangdoodles. I don't know if it's Whangdoodles, but that's always how I pronounced it in my head. And this is by none other than Julie Andrews. And it says Julie Andrews Edwards on the cover, but if you don't know her, she's from The Sound of Music, she's from The Princess Diaries. I had never known that she wrote books, but this was my introduction to her books. And with this one, it's 3 little kids that basically meet this professor, I think that like lives down the street or is nearby them, and he basically asks them for their help to go and save the very last Whangdoodle. And they do all these preparations to basically get transported into this imaginary world. So I guess like with this fairy tale world, you could almost think of it as like the Lorax type of thing. Because with this, a lot of the magical creatures from this world are disappearing because people stop believing in them. And like it says here, the way to Whangdoodle Land isn't easy. The children must learn to see things in a completely different way. When at last they succeed, they encounter many wondrous creatures, but it seems they'll never find the elusive Whangdoodle. This was such a creative and magical book. Honestly, I probably wouldn't have picked it up when I was younger because this cover wasn't one that would have really drawn me in, but I just remember loving this book so much. There was also, I believe, like this villain character that was always trying to thwart whatever they were doing, and I loved this book so much. It has a lot of wear and tear as well, but I've held on to this book ever since I was able to get a copy of it, and I love it so, so much. Another book series that I discovered when I was in elementary school was this one, Dealing with Dragons by Patricia C. Reed. Hopefully I'm saying that right, but I have all of these books. They're like little pocketbook editions, and honestly these ones aren't really touched at all because I actually read these books from my library and I loved them so much that I really wanted to have physical copies of my own. With this story, our main character is a princess and she's been doing all the stereotypical things such as learning how to do ladylike tasks, but she's never had any interest in that. She doesn't care about going and getting rescued by a prince, being a damsel in distress. She wants to learn how to sword fight and do all these more masculine tasks. And so eventually she ends up going and meeting this frog who tells her that there's actually a dragon that's in need of a princess. And so she's like, you know what? I'm gonna go over there and ask them to go and kidnap me, and I will go and take care of them and take care of their cave and all sorts of other things like that. And that's just what she does. However, her family isn't too pleased with this, and I guess other princes have learned about her being captured by a dragon, so they're constantly trying to go and rescue her. And there's just a bunch of other things that go and happen in these books, and I loved it so much. I think that this was a great book to go and read as a younger girl, with a great, I guess, role model to look up to, and being okay with being different. So this was a series that I love so much, and honestly, I don't know too many people that love this book series as much as I do, aside from Jade Juniper. So yeah, if you've never checked out this book series and maybe have some kiddos, I would highly recommend these. Now, I don't have a copy of it here, and I don't know if I do have any editions of it. I might have the first book, but A Series of Unfortunate Events was another book series that I loved so much. I just devoured those books. I mean, it was unfortunate, as the title is, A Series of Unfortunate Events, but just the things that the Baudelaire children had to go through. With A Series of Unfortunate Events, we have Violet, Klaus, and Sunny, whose parents unfortunately died in a fire, and they're orphaned and basically get led through the foster system to different kind of estranged family members or people that had close connections with her parents. But the first one that they're brought to is Count Olaf, and he is an absolutely horrible person who only desires the children's fortune that is left to them by their parents. And they do get taken away from Count Olaf and brought to other people in the other books, but unfortunately Count Olaf does not want to let these children out of his clutches, and he will do whatever it takes so that they're basically brought back to him. A bunch of different adventures that these kids go on, and each one of them has a different skill set. Violet is an inventor, and she always puts up her hair whenever she needs to focus. That was something that was very prominent in my childhood, and whenever I needed to focus, I would always put my hair up in a ponytail because I needed it out of my face. I needed to put 100% into whatever task I was doing. Then there's Klaus, who was a very good reader and could always go and remember a book that he read at some point and could bring facts forward that could be useful in whatever situation they were in. And then Sunny was the youngest child, and she had these teeth that could just chew through everything. And these books were just so great for the imagination. I loved them so much, even though they were really sad and devastating, but there were mysteries that were brought forward, and you just wanted to know what would happen next. Would they actually get a happy ending? And I won't spoil anything for you. You just will have to read those books yourself, but they were some of my favorite as well. I have so many books in front of me, so I'm sorry if I'm getting too chatty over them, but I love all these books so much. Another one that was another series that was important to me in elementary school was the Among the Hidden series by Margaret Peterson Haddix. This is not the book cover that I had in the edition that I read growing up, and I'll probably have to look for the exact one because something about the nostalgia piece is I want the exact cover of the book in the version that I read growing up. I don't know why, but that's just a piece about myself that is really important with recollecting a lot of these books. But this was a series that I think I actually started reading in one of the assigned reading groups in a class, and then I had to carry on and read the other books in the series. Basically, a third child is forbidden in the family. Families are only allowed to have 2 kids, and if the government finds out that you have a third kid, they'll get taken away. Well, with this family in our main story, there is a third child, and he basically is hidden away. He's not allowed to go outside. His brother's friends cannot know that he has another sibling. He basically has to act like he never existed. But the thing is, he actually ends up finding out that his neighbor across the street has another child, and it's a girl. And so with these books, we basically kind of learn a little bit about these children that are all hidden and secretive, and what they're trying to do to change the government's rules about them not being allowed to exist and letting them actually have lives. I thought these books were so good, and now looking back on it, I feel like this might have been my first introduction to thrillers, and maybe why I ended up loving them as much as I do today. All right. Then I think we're going to move on to middle school books, and I might have gotten a few of the other ones that I said mixed up. A Series of Unfortunate Events might have actually been middle school, or at least 5th grade, somewhere around there, because I know some of the books did come out a little bit later, at least with a 13th book. And I'm pretty sure I got it from a school book fair. But a book that was really important to me in middle school was actually Gamer Girl by Mari Mancusi. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but this was one that I remember I had so many fond memories with, because in middle school, that was kind of when I started getting into gaming. I played World of Warcraft, and I just really loved going and diving into those fantasy worlds. But the thing is, a lot of kids that I grew up with weren't really gamers. They weren't interested in that stuff, especially in my friend group. So I really could sympathize with the character in this book. I believe she was a little bit of a loner. She really loved going and doing artwork, I believe specifically manga. And no one really knew that she was this gamer girl and had a character in this really popular video game. But then she ends up going and making a friend through there, and I believe like it was a little bit of a romance piece as well. But this was a book that I just absolutely adored and felt like I could really relate to. Those nostalgic memories are just ones that I will forever cherish. Then I have Avalon Web of Magic by Rachel Roberts. This was one I feel like I was a little bit outside of the age range for when I did discover it, but I couldn't resist, because with this book, there's basically 3 girls, and they kind of have these magical powers and can talk to animals. 2 of the girls find these stones, and with these stones, they help curate their magical abilities. This character right here, she could actually go and heal animals on top of talking to them, and she moved into this new area and didn't really have friends, but she definitely had animals, and it was just such a cute story. There's also these really cute images throughout the book, and it was just something that I absolutely loved. I still haven't read all the books, but I have been going and collecting them. And I think I'm still missing a few editions of the books, because they do have different covers, and I don't like those editions at all. I want to have the covers that have this artwork in the entirety, because there's a few that will have this, but then they'll have like this picture frame and then not have any of the background images. So these are ones that I do kind of want to revisit, because they were so cute and so precious. And if you can't tell, like, I'm a girl that has always loved animals, so this was one that was 100% right up my alley. Then before we go into my vampire era, I still was a horse girl, and one series that I absolutely loved, and sadly I don't have any books for, is the Heartland series. I know that there's a Netflix series that I'm pretty sure is based on the show, but I haven't watched it because I know they changed a few characteristics for the show. With these books, I loved them so much, because our main character, she goes and rescues horses, and they'll go and rehabilitate them. All these things that just were so touching and so heartfelt. I lived near horses. I always loved going and visiting them after school, going and feeding them apples or giving them extra grass. And I've also always wanted to go and rescue animals. I'd love to eventually be a foster for kittens, because I know, especially when it's kitten season, some shelters and even some foster locations get really overwhelmed. So that has always been a bucket list item for me. But yeah, Heartland, I think, really went and pulled at the heartstrings for some of those things that I really want to eventually do. And this is another series that I'd love to go and get copies for so I could have them on my bookshelves. All right, now we're gonna move into my vampire era. So of course I have to go and mention Twilight. I'm sure you already know Twilight and the storyline and everything involved in that. I was obsessed with Twilight. I feel like it was the first book that I read that was that thick aside from Aragon, and I devoured those books so quickly to the point where I believe when I finished one of the books, I had to beg my dad to take me to the bookstore so that I could get the next book and could continue reading on with the series. And then when Breaking Dawn came out, I was actually visiting my cousins in Texas, and my uncle basically signed up so that we could go and get a book the day that it released. So that was something that was a really fond memory to me. But aside from those books, I also did read Marked by PC Cast and Kristen Cast. I didn't read necessarily all of the books. I liked them, but one thing that kind of drove me a little bit wild was just the amount of talking and chatter in them. So I did kind of take a break from them, and I do want to try to revisit the series. I don't think I own all of them, but I would like to revisit the series. I've heard that it hasn't aged well, but I would like to at least know what happens and how everything ends. Then another one that I really loved was The Vampire Academy by Rochelle Mead. I loved this series so much. I loved some of the magic that was applied to some of the vampires, the half vampires that were involved, and the bad characters. I can't remember how it's pronounced, and I don't want to try to say it and then mess it up, but this was probably one of my favorite series, and I have all the books. I devoured these books so quickly. I know that there was a movie that came out on it, and honestly it wasn't really my favorite. I felt like they kind of made a huge joke of it and made it kind of cheesy, but I am really curious to try to reread these books and rewatch that movie, and then also watch the TV show that was based on this book series as well. Now, a book series that I absolutely loved that was by PC Cast was actually these. And please ignore the spiciness of the covers, but these are just a few of my favorite ones. This one is Goddess of the Sea and then Goddess of Spring. So Goddess of Spring is actually a Hades retelling, and then Goddess of the Sea is a mermaid story. I absolutely was obsessed with mermaids. Mermaids were some of my favorite fantasy creatures because I was on swim team, and I would just always imagine whenever I was in the water that I had a mermaid tail, and loved the way that the water felt in my hair. I really hated wearing a swim cap because it stopped me from being able to feel that. But with these books, something that I loved about these, and just PC Cast writing in general, is that it always reminds women of the power that they have inside of them and how amazing they are. With both of these books, we have main characters that are feeling a little bit low, have lost touch with their inner magic, and then a goddess or some other high being basically goes and tells them that they're going to help them out and switch their body with someone else. And in the process of doing that, they have to go and help some sort of situation that's at hand. And while that's happening, they realize how powerful they are, how magical they are, and how worthy they are too. And they were so pivotal in my coming of age, and I love these books so much. I think I've read both of these at least 3 or 4 times, and that shows how much I love them. I'm not quite sure if they've aged well or not, but I am kind of curious to try to reread them. I'm so sorry this video is probably like 50 million years long, but I'm having so much fun with it, so I hope you are as well. Wake by Amanda Hocking was one that I just remembered and I forgot to pull out. This was an amazing series that I loved. I didn't usually pick up books that had realistic humans on the cover. It just wasn't something that I was ever interested in, but I'm so glad that I decided to take a chance on this book because I loved this so much. We have a character that is basically on swim team. Swimming is her absolute life, and she wants to go and get a scholarship and everything, but she also has a crush on her friend who is the boy next door. And there's 3 girls that are sirens, and they kind of have their eyes set on this girl because they are missing someone in their group and they need her in order to complete them. And this was just so good. There was a little bit of like a horror thriller aspect, tiny little bit, which was just a tiny little amount, but I ate it up, just getting my first look at sirens and how scary they could be and how deadly. It was just so good, and I loved this series so much. Then I started getting into romance books sort of in high school. I still was very much interested in vampire books, and I know that there's other ones that I probably read, but honestly, they're not really coming to mind, so they probably weren't as impactful for me. But some of the other ones that I read, like between, I guess, high school and maybe a couple years in college, would be From Notting Hill with Love Actually by Ali McNamara. This was one that I don't even remember why I ended up picking it up, because the cover isn't necessarily one that would have drawn me in and made me want to pick it up. But with this book, I remember it involved a character that was very obsessed with love stories that she saw on the movies, and had this very glamorous and romantic look at that type of stuff. But she's not really hitting any sort of luck with romance and not really finding her person. And then a house sitting opportunity pops up, and she decides to take up that opportunity because it's one of her favorite movie settings. And her friends and family just are saying, like, it's not going to be this glamorous, nothing's going to turn out the way you're wanting. She refuses to listen to them. And she has a neighbor next door that's just a grump and pessimistic, all of those things. She's starting to learn, like, is everything like she's been thinking of just a figment of her imagination? Does real life have a lot of these glamorous moments or not? And I loved this book so much, and I think this is what kind of curated my love of Grumpy Meets Sunshine romance books. I do remember that I actually sobbed my eyes out at the end of this book, and I think it's been over 10 years since I read it, and I'd be very curious to try to go and pick it up and reread it again. Another romance book that I absolutely loved was Nicholas Sparks' Safe Haven. I devoured this book. I loved it so much. This was actually a book that my mom's coworker gave us, and I read it first and then my mom read it, and I just remember we would go and talk about this book and how we felt about certain moments when reading it, and then when the movie came out, we were both really excited to go and watch it together. With this book, I think this is one that really also added another reason for why I loved thrillers so much, because with this story, our main character, she has escaped a very difficult situation, and you don't really get to know what's going on. You get some flashbacks of someone on the police force and that he's looking for someone, and then we get flashbacks to our main character who's trying to keep hidden and keep a low profile but also struggling to survive, and there's a little bit of romance and other pieces that pop up, and it was just such a heartwarming story but also had that thriller piece that I loved so much. So this was a favorite book of mine as well. Then we get into my actual taste of thrillers, and one of them is Behind Her Eyes by Sarah Pinborough. I loved this book so much. This was a book that my aunt actually recommended for me, and I was like, I don't know if I'm really gonna like it or not, but I decided to take a chance on it, and I'm so glad I did. This was amazing. So with this book, our main character Louise is a single mom and a secretary, and she has a kiss with this stranger at a bar, but discovers that this person is actually her new boss, and him and his wife are new to town. But then when she's going and walking around, I guess the wife of this husband goes and asks her out to coffee, and she kind of goes and creates a friendship with this person. But the interesting piece is the wife is going and telling her some different pieces about her new boss, and the boss kind of seems like sad and down, and there's just these mysteries and pieces, and it's who's telling you the truth and who is lying and creating this facade to you. The ending was something that I totally never would have expected happening. It was so good, and I believe there is a show on Netflix for this, and it was actually really good. I was very impressed with how well done it was, and I look back fondly at this book because it did create my love of thrillers. Another book that I absolutely loved was Brenda Novak, Her Darkest Nightmare. I think this author mostly goes and writes romance books, but this was a thriller series that I think I first found through an audiobook, and I found I wasn't really fond of the voices that the narrator was using, so I decided to read the physical book instead, and I loved these books so much. We have a main character that studies psychopaths and decides to open up an institute in a small, secluded town in Alaska. And no one there is happy about her doing this, but she has a goal with going and studying psychopaths because she went and survived a very horrible attack from her ex-boyfriend growing up, where her childhood friends didn't make it, but she did, and the psychopath is still around and has the goal of going and getting her. This was so intense. It had high stakes, but it also did have a pretty intense romance piece as well. I would say to definitely go and check your trigger warnings with this book because they do have really, really intense trigger warnings for it. But I loved this series so much and was another thing that pushed me along with my love of thrillers. And then after all those books, I kind of took a little bit of a hiatus from reading. College kind of burnt me out, and there was a lot of other things mixed in, and I just fell out of love with picking up books and reading all of them. And it wasn't until over a year ago when I started my booktube channel that I actually rediscovered my love of reading, and I think something that really pushed that along was Out on a Limb by Hannah Bonham Young. When I picked up these books, I had actually started my disability advocacy journey on Instagram. I had kind of reached a low moment with a very ableist person, and I decided I was going to step up and talk about accurate limb difference representation, and while doing that, I was very curious about books. And I was looking for books that actually had accurate limb difference representation in them because when I was growing up, that was not something that was present. And I was so excited when I found this book, Out on a Limb, because it was the closest thing I could find to something that looked like my own hands and my own limb differences. So I decided to go and read them on a whim, not knowing anyone else that had read them. And I was absolutely in love. I was crying, I was sobbing, I was kicking my feet and giggling. I was so obsessed with these books to the point that I have 4 editions of them. This was the indie version, and then this was the one that was traditionally published. I'm so glad I read it when I did because I think I got this book 2 months before this one came out. These books meant so much to me because our main character, she has a limb difference, and she has the kind of humor that I've grown up having where it's just kind of using jokes and things like that. She is at a Halloween party that her best friend's throwing, and she ends up going and meeting someone else that is also dressed up like a pirate. She's dressed like a pirate, he's dressed like a pirate, and they both kind of just hit it off with their humor, their jokes, their limb differences, and they have a one-night stand, but the one-night stand ends up with an unexpected pregnancy. And that wasn't really a topic that I was thinking I would be interested in reading, but because of the limb difference piece, I was like, you know what? No, I'm gonna read this book. I'm so glad I did. I loved it so much. You will constantly hear me talking about my love of this book, probably for the rest of time. And Charles, my partner, actually read it too, and they loved this book so much. So I'm so glad that I picked this one up, and it just got me started into reading again and kind of helped push things along with my booktube channel. And then honorable mention would be The Honey Witch by Sydney J. Shields, as well as The Spell Shop by Sarah Beth Durst. These ones I feel like just kind of wrap things up perfectly with that whimsy nostalgia piece that my grandma started in me with the books I mentioned in the beginning of the video. Both of these books just gave me those vibes of things that my grandma would always remind me of, with just like fairies and animals and just the beauty of nature. So with this one, it does involve a grandma that is a witch, a honey witch to be exact, and she asks her granddaughter to go and live with her so that she can take over being a honey witch as well. And because our main character isn't really having the best prospects in doing the type of lifestyle that everyone expects of her, she decides that she will go and do what her grandma's asking. The only caveat is that she can never go and fall in love. And so while this is happening, while she's discovering the magic of being a honey witch, there is someone that she kind of has interest in, but she's like, no, nothing will ever come of that. And I just thought this book was so beautiful, so magical, and I think it would be a book that my grandma would actually love reading, if I'm completely honest. And then with The Spell Shop, I don't have this book because Charles is actually going and reading it, but with The Spell Shop, this one was so cute because we have a main character who's a librarian, and at the beginning of the book, she basically has to go and run away with her sentient spider plant, Kaz, because there is a revolution happening, and there are people about to go and break into the library to go and burn it down. So she goes and packs up as many books as she can because she cannot bear the thought of seeing these books all destroyed. And so they flee, but she ends up going to an island that she grew up on as a child before her parents ended up having her move away. So she thinks that she'll be completely safe here until she's able to go and return back to the library. But while she's doing that and going through pieces of her childhood, she realizes how amazing it is to be in a small town and to live around nature, and realizes that there's a lot of pieces that she missed out because she was always deep down in the depths of the library and refused to go and meet other people. It was such a heartwarming book, and also was one that I rated 5 stars, and it just kind of made me realize that I do really need to read more cozy fantasy because that kind of started it all for me. So I know this was a really long and chunky video, but I felt like it was the best way to go and wrap up Bookmas and just revisit why books meant so much to me and just the different adventures that they took me on. I love each and every one of these books that I have surrounding me on the floor, and I can't wait to go and revisit all of those worlds and feel all the magic that they brought into my life. And if you read any of these books, if I mentioned ones that you were excited to go and see on the screen because you haven't heard anyone else talk about them, please let me know down in the comments below. And if you got to this point of the video and you don't know what to comment, I think we need some whimsy vibes, so maybe put like flowers, bumblebees, nature pieces, sparkles, something along those lines, whatever resonates the most with you. And I just want to say again, thank you so much for being with me for 13 days of Bookmas, and I've had so much fun. This has been an absolute blast, and I can't wait to go and show you what else I have planned before the year wraps up. So if that sounds like something that intrigues you and you don't want to miss out on any of that, definitely go and subscribe to my channel, possibly turn on the bell so you can be notified whenever I have a new video. And as always, I always wrap up my videos with this reminder to never forget that you're worthy and capable of amazing things. I love you all so much. Bye, friends. Nugget touch? Yeah, good girl. Good girl. Yeah. Oh, thank you. You just had food too. Yeah. Did you have a good snack? Did you have a good snack? Yeah. The best snack. You're so not amused. I love you though. But she has a goal. She wants to go. Hi, Nugs. Yeah, do you have a goal too? Hi. I love you.